Welcome and thank you for joining us. My name is Mary Grace Humes and I am a senior at CNU this year, and I am one of Dr. Sprenger's interns in the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. Before we get started with introductions, I would like to go over the format for tonight's discussion. We're going to try and stick to close to an hour this evening to be respectful of everyone's time. We'll have two parts. The first portion will be predetermined questions, and the second part will be audience submitted question and answer. So thank you to all of you who pre-submitted questions for this evening. When we get to the Q&A portion, we may also have time for live questions as well. Please use the Q&A feature located at the bottom of the screen to submit your questions. Even if we cannot get to all the questions live, questions will be logged and saved so that we can circle back around to them after the close of the event. So without further ado, let me introduce our moderator for the evening, Dr. Angela Sprenger, Christopher Newport University's Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer. Dr. Sprenger, the floor is yours.
Thanks so much, Mary Grace. I appreciate it, and Happy New Year. Thank you for taking care of yourself and staying well, and thank you to all of our audience participants and of course to our panelists. Let me jump right in with no ado whatsoever. I'd like to introduce our panel, and then we will start with the questions that we have prepared and started discussing. Of course, right before these panels, we always log on early and the dialogue starts. And so I'm really excited to hear what the gentlemen are going to share with you tonight. First, I'll introduce, and please wave when I'm introducing you. I'm going to go first from our undergraduate panelist. Michael Bush is a junior political science major here at Christopher Newport University. He has just started his term as president of the Upsilon Beta chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. He's no stranger to the DEI Dialogue Series events, and we welcome you back, Michael. Thank you. Dr. Kianga Thomas is an associate professor at Norfolk State University. Behold the green and gold, is that how that goes?
Correct.
Dr. Thomas has been an educator for 25 years as a teacher and a professor. His research focuses on gifted African-American students in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, and teacher efficacy. An alumnus of Hampton University and the College of William and Mary, Dr. Thomas is the president of the Zeta Lambda chapter of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you.
Lucien Metellus is a man of Haitian descent, a graduate of Syracuse University, and a business analyst with over 20 years experience in the IT field. He has provided millions of dollars in savings to businesses through well-run technology project management. And he has served in multiple roles in Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity since his initiation in 1998. Currently, he's serving as the Eastern Regional Vice President of the fraternity. We are honored to have you with us tonight, sir.
Good evening.
And thank you so much for agreeing to mentor students of mine. I appreciate that. And finally, our guest of honor tonight is the distinguished Dr. Willis L. Lonser III. Dr. Lonser is an executive scientist with 20 years of global pharmaceutical research and development and global medical affairs experience. A native of Richmond, Virginia, and a graduate at Island Springs High School. Go Springers! Dr. Lonser holds a bachelor's degree in chemistry and the doctorate in biochemistry from the University of Akron, where he was a prestigious Patricia Roberts Harris pre-doctoral fellow. He completed a postdoctoral fellowship in physiology and biophysics at Case Western Reserve University School of Medicine and has served the fraternity he loves since 1986 as college stepmaster, college chapter advisor, area director, district director, and now we are honored to welcome him in his newest role as the 36th General President of Alpha Phi Alpha Fraternity Incorporated. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you with us tonight. Thank you all, gentlemen.
Thank you. Thank you.
Tonight's launch of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Dialogue Series, or DEI Dialogue Series, for the spring 2021 semester will give us an opportunity to continue to honor and cherish the memory and legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King. So let's get started. I'll come to you first, Dr. Lonser. What is the legacy of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. to you?
Well, Dr. King's legacy to me involves a great embracing of humanity and a push for us to address major issues that really embrace the needs of humanity. He always looked at injustice. He looked at poverty. He looked at addressing the breaking of the cycle of poverty and the betterment of man in his existence on the earth, to be better in his vocation, to be better in his deportment and comportment in the community. So I believe that when we talk about Dr. King and what he believed, he was a drum major, yes, for justice, social justice, and definitely one who elevated the principles and concepts of betterment for all men, for all people, for all races.
And you mentioned a couple of things that you don't hear about too often in common society, and actually the way we've been seeing common society behave, it's hard to apply those words, deportment and comportment, like how we carry ourselves. It matters. I'm sorry, I am not on the panel. Gentlemen, would someone else like to jump in and add to that before we move on to question 2?
Well, for me personally, the legacy of King is more personal for me. When I was a 9-year-old child growing up in Brooklyn, I asked my dad to buy me a book, and he came home with a letter from a Birmingham jail, and that was my first exposure. He told me to read this, and being 9 years old, trying to read a letter from a Birmingham jail, brothers Thomas, took a while. But what it did was it opened the door for me to talk more about my personal struggles with social justice. And that was my first entry into social justice. And so for me, I always refer back to that book because he talks more broadly about social justice, not just being a racial issue, but it's a global issue. And I think that for me, when I think about all the issues that are going on today, those are global issues. Poverty, no matter how you feel about one side or the other of an aisle, is generally revolves around access to information, access to rights, access to just being heard. And I think that those fundamental principles are missing now. We need more people to stand up for the disenfranchised. And if that occurs, then, that's truly then we'll be living his legacy instead of talking about it. Because we talk a lot about his legacy, but we really live it?
Yeah, and a lot of people talk about the legacy who are nowhere close to living it. That's one of the reasons I wanted us to take time tonight to focus on those writings, those speeches, and what you gentlemen think about them, so that we get that conversation out there for all of our listeners, all of our participants tonight. And this is being recorded, so anybody who comes back and watches this can kind of refresh themselves on what Dr. King was really talking about. Not just pulling one line out of one speech, talking about having a dream or something. Sorry, I'm not on the panel. Shall we move on to speeches and written material? Okay. So which speech or written material of Dr. King's do you find most inspirational or most relevant right now? Brother Lucian has already reminded us of the letter from a Birmingham jail. Where shall we start? Dr. Lonzer, Dr. Thomas?
I'll be happy to start.
Go ahead, Dr. Thomas.
Thank you. The speech of King that resonates to me is his 1967 speech at Stanford University entitled The Other America. And in that speech, he talks about there are two Americas, and how that resonates today. We can clearly see on January 6th, during the insurrection, that you had one group who was, we can say, peacefully removed from the state capitol. But when questions had arisen, how that insurrection would have been differently with Black Lives Matter. And so over the years, this is something that King has, brought to the attention of America, not only America, but also the world, is that we do live in two Americas where there are, double standards that do not support people of color as it does white America. And so that particular speech at Stanford really resonates and kind of highlights today. I mean, it's pretty poignant now.
Yeah. Thank you.
What's going on in America?
Yeah.
Well, if I may just share, I had mentioned earlier in our conversation about in 1967, he also invoked that powerful speech on the fierce urgency of now. And I'm drawn back to the quote where he discusses that we are not faced with the fact that tomorrow is today. And we are confronted with the fierce urgency of now. In this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is such a thing as being too late, and that this is no time for apathy or complacency. And when I think about empowering individuals, no matter what walk of life you come from those who might be vestiges in the ivory tower, and we talk theory, and we can talk, let's say, theory, and we can definitely expand on the premise of what if this or what if that, but versus those who might be drawn out in applying those principles in the real world, whether you're in industry, whether you're in hospital on the line. It's where all can come together at some point and say that we must take a stance together. There's a point where we all must embrace the reality of where we are. And just like Dr. Kananga mentioned, the insurrection, that was also an embracing that this is no time for complacency or apathy. Things are dynamic. Things are not necessarily as we perceive them to be, whether you agree with them or not. If you agree with them, then, you have a right, but you don't have a right necessarily to do the things that may have taken place, that type of thing. So,
Yeah.
But I'll leave it there.
Oh, yes, Michael, I see you. Come on in.
Go ahead, then. Yeah.
No, brothers, I wanted to piggyback off of both of those points, and specifically Brother Thomas about the speech at Stanford University, The Other America. Because I was looking at it the other day, and mainly because, being raised even in public school systems now, we kind of are fed one specific understanding of who Dr. King is and what his legacy is, and we have to go outside of our current understandings of the I Have a Dream and maybe bits and pieces of Letter of Birmingham Jail to understand what Dr. King would actually say. And so to piggyback off of the urgency part, I think that it was important that it's important that people understand that Dr. King was not a fan of neutrality in times of moral crisis, and understanding that, when these issues arise, like, when we look at historical events, when we look at, moving forward, when we're not moving in the way of all on one accord, we're sitting in this bind that doesn't not look. I don't have the right words right now, but
Doesn't serve anybody.
Mm-hmm. It's in times of neutrality, when people can't take all one stance, it's very hard to be productive in the way of specifically for his way of civil rights and justice.
You know what's interesting, Brother Bush, is that when you think about it, that's always been America, right? So when King was doing those things, not everybody was on board. Let's remember that the King that we celebrate now was considered a terrorist by certain governmental organizations. He was trying to drag people of color along with him on this quest, because the other big myth is that all African Americans were with him, which was not the case at all. So in many surveys, they found him to be part of the problem. So when you're standing on the moral high ground, and I think that's why I always refer to, and Dr. Lonzer knows the preacher in me, I always refer back to the sermon, The Drum Major Instinct. The reason I refer back to that sermon is because it calls us to not seek self-gratification, because I think a lot of times we get comfortable, right? We go to these fancy universities, as Brother Lonzer said, we sit in a glass tower, we get real philosophical, and we want to talk about all the accomplishments that we have, and Dr. Thomas and Brother Bush and, Dr. Angeles, all of you have great resumes, but what are we going to do about service and helping educate the masses, right? Even when we're not welcome. Okay, it's real easy to cast aspersions on those we don't agree with. It's even harder to get them to see our perspective and bring them over. And sometimes, and if you remember correctly, right before he died, he preached a sermon at New York, in New York. And that sermon probably was his death sentence.
Yeah.
It was his death sentence because he spoke out against the war, a very specific thing that the U.S. government did not want him speaking about.
Lucy, and that's my next question. Thank you very much. Was anybody waiting to jump in on that one, or shall we move on to that question?
Go ahead.
Okay. One of Dr. King's last speeches, the Sunday sermon, focused on the goal or the theme of being anti-racism, anti-poverty, and anti-war.
Mhm.
How well do you gentlemen think we've achieved those goals? And what do you think Dr. King would be saying today?
Well, I'll broach the discussion. I think that we have made some progress. Now the question is, it's relative when we talk about how much progress we've made. If anything, I can say that we have brought more people into the discussion who may have been disengaged some 40, 50 years ago. And one of the challenges that we still face is the vitriolic silence of those whom we knew. Angela, Dr. Springer and I went to high school with folks who live in that area now, and some may be watching this program right now, who have been silent on these
important issues.
Well, they're not just, these are catastrophic issues.
Correct.
The fact that, again,
You're right.
we have a right to protest.
I mean, those flags.
We have a right to go out here and disagree maybe with how our government may run or how it may operate, but to cause an insurrection and storm our Capitol.
With a war flag.
Indeed. I mean, those are different things. So when we talk about what folks have been silent on, but they will do that. I mean, the fact that a man can be murdered by a police officer, I mean, depending on how you view it. And I'm speaking of George Floyd, per se.
Because there are plenty to name.
There are plenty to name. Eric Garner. You know, I don't want to go down that pipe, but we're down that pipe. And I think that's the challenge we continue to face. And if we say things that don't resonate, then we become radicalized, or we're radicalized. And it goes both ways, Mike. Okay. It goes both ways. But I'll start it there, and I'll let Dr. Thomas or Metellus or Brother Bush pick it up, because I know we're all capable.
Well, today I think King will still maybe have some issues around the racism discussion, because it's pretty prevalent that we still live in a racist society. If you've been, paying attention to, the media for the past 5 or 6 years, you would definitely see that, we have some ways to go in terms of addressing racism, as well as poverty. So I think the words he spoke during his time as a civil rights leader still resonates today. But importantly, one of the things King identified, especially around the last year of his existence, is that he noticed that racism was not as prevalent. I mean, racism was prevalent in the South, but it was more systematic and substantiated in the North, as well as major metropolitan cities. He identified that during the march in Chicago, when he said, there's 7 times more people out here protesting us than down in Alabama, Mississippi. And so that woke him up in terms of thinking about this global understanding of racism and some of the things he and his team had to address, which today is still, still going on, right, prevalent in our society. So, we do have individuals out there in the forefront, such as Angela Rye, Bakari Sellers, those individuals who are out, doing things, as well as, the fraternity in the Panhandle, as well as some of the sororities. We're out here doing these types of things, bringing attention to these racial issues and racial injustices. But, King's words then definitely resonate now, because, truth be told, I don't think much has changed, other than, we are less, we're more, I guess we're now it seems like we're more a little segregated than we were in the past 4 years. So it's,
Yeah.
We have a suggestion in the Q&A, if I might jump in right quickly. I'm overjoyed to see this name. Brother Fred Smith, the state director of Alpha Phi Alpha here in Virginia, has joined us, and he suggests, and maybe one of you will recognize this and want to speak to it. He says, read the King essay in the Maroon Tiger when he was a student at Morehouse. I am not familiar with that one. So I guess the Maroon Tiger was the Morehouse paper, maybe?
Yeah,
I think the district director is Fred Scott.
yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Rather-
I saw Fred Smith and thought Fred Scott. Okay, so I'm sorry, Mr. Smith. Thank you very much for your comment.
But I know Brother Scott is on the line. I did want to address something real quick, and then we could talk about that essay, that speech at while he was in college. But what I will say is that what we're missing is that third component, the war component, right? The U.S. has been in constant war for the past. If we look at the whole history of the United States, it had not been at war or in occupation of war for about maybe 6 years in the whole history of the country. And so we're in war right now. And racism, and as much as we don't see the connection, racism, poverty, and war all work together, right? So what did the King always say? If I could get poor white people to understand that their condition was just as similar as poor Black people, then I could make some substantive change, right? So all those things tie together, and we're always in this perpetual war thing with the United States, right? Our economy drives it. You know, poor people tend to sign up, not saying that we don't love their service and appreciate their service, because we have a lot of brothers that serve in the military, but we want to make sure that we're also addressing that issue of perpetual war. Why are we in perpetual war? It's our economic interest. What are our economic interests driven by? Money, policy, procedures, different things like that. So we always have to be careful that we don't miss that third part that King is always talking about, because we tend to focus a lot on the race and the poverty side of it, but those things didn't get him killed. It was the anger of him towards war.
Yeah.
If I could just offer one additional comment, and I know that I would say Dr. Thomas and I are definitely in agreement, but I would just say that the icing on the cake, though, we've seen incremental shifts towards more integration, more embracing of the culture, but many of the glaring realities of the 60s or the 50s or the 40s are still there. They still have position. I think it was manifested in this election where you saw some 70 to 75 million people who obviously did not care that the president of the United States had no moral constitution at all.
You know,
could say misogynistic things, could say racially charged things, could say anything that he wanted to say. And they enjoyed not being politically correct and respectful. That's the base of those who follow that philosophy. And what is really ironic about it, in my opinion, and this drifts towards the war conversation, is that a lot of it was fascist, if you will, in nature. But those ideologies are also associated with war, and I'll say stark contrasts in society that drive mentalities of war. To say that we are so different that we can't coexist, therefore I have to attack you and take what's yours. And I'm not a socialist, and I'm not a socialist, I'm not or anything on that nature, but that's just the foundation, it seems to be philosophically, of what those things are in terms of drivers. It did Dr. Thomas's comments reminded me of that, and it's just interesting. But I'll leave it there so we can move forward.
All right, thank you, gentlemen. I do want to move forward to some audience submitted questions, if that's okay. I want to interject one here from Irene. I don't know if she's with us tonight, and I hope so. Irene asked, or started out stating, many advocate for the abolition of Greek life due to its history of racism and exclusion, among other reasons. However, there are many other institutions that have similar histories, such as higher education, that don't face calls for abolition. So where do you believe Dr. King and other civil rights leaders of his time would stand on this issue, the abolition of Greek life?
Well, I'll start. One of the things that I know about Alpha Phi Alpha, and we were founded on the campus of Cornell University.
I forgot about
And we were founded to, in many respects, be the antithesis of what was observed of Greeks at that time. Our symbols, although we wear Greek letters, our letters have a meaning, and our symbolisms are quite often African in nature. The Sphinx of Giza, which you can see over the right shoulder of Mr. Metellus, if you're looking at his shield or his escutcheon behind him. That symbol, the Sphinx is the oldest statue in the world. And they chose that very symbol because it had the characteristics not of a Greek person, but of an African person. But we shared the letters, we joined the system. It has, for various reasons. But we look to stamp out prejudice, to discountenance evil. Those are the things that Alpha Phi Alpha was founded on. So when Dr. King joined Alpha Phi Alpha, we stood for that. Mind you, we're not perfect and no organization is perfect, but we continue to find a mutual bond between men who are college educated. We stand for principles that respect persons. We do that. We stand for that. So I think Dr. King would not have been an abolitionist, but in fact, standing with us to make sure that we uphold the principles on which we were founded. And I'll leave it there so that Brother Bush and all the other bright alphas on the call can talk about it. I'm just going to leave it there.
Absolutely. I want to also bring in a more current perspective on what Greek life looks like on college campuses, because I think that's where Irene is coming from in this question, because I definitely understand that. I understand that Greek life oftentimes puts out, it looks like it should be a perfect image of what people should do and what people look like and what people, the idea of service and the culture of that. But oftentimes that's just, the outer shell. And then behind that is, a lot of things that don't pertain to service, don't pertain to wanting to help the community. And so I think that, partially when we look at Greek life as a whole, I think that, we need to understand that Greek life was put in place to do this type of work. It wasn't just a party. It wasn't just to, have a time to socialize. It was a time to like founded in 1906 at Cornell University. We were founded to make sure that we could understand that we had a brotherhood on campus, and that Black men could congregate in spaces so that we could understand that we are trying to be successful and we are trying to transcend all human beings and not just be, figureheads and placements in front of people.
And I think the key component of that, Brother Bush, is that we need to continue to have those discussions in those spaces, right? Because when Dr. King talked about, when he spoke about fraternities and sororities and organizations in general, he said, what is your sense of service, right? And what does that look like? So when we talk about disbanding Greek systems, what we're really talking about is we have a culture issue. And sometimes inadvertently, we look at a culture issue and try to put it on an institution, right? And so what's the culture issue with fraternities? I can guarantee you that a majority of fraternity men are not participating in illicit activities. I can guarantee you a majority of fraternity men want to do service of some kind, whether they're Black, white, Latino, Asian, or any diaspora. They want to service their communities in the organizations, whatever that service looks like. However, there's this subculture among men where we cover up these activities, where we cover up the disenfranchisement of women, where we cover up the rape culture, the violence against people. But the question becomes, are we holding them accountable as members of these organizations, right? Because the reality of the situation, Dr. Sprenger, is no matter what we do, right, is if we don't hold them accountable, then the organization loses its primary function, right? So I tell my brothers all the time, if I love you, I'm going to hold you accountable.
Yes.
And if I don't care, then I'm not going to hold you accountable. And
I'm just going to let you do whatever.
I'm going to let you do whatever. And I think that getting rid of the Greek system is not solving the problem. The problem is really cultural, and we have to reevaluate how we deal with misogyny, how we men deal with themselves, how we deal with homophobia, how we deal with transphobia, all these kinds of things that we've built around being men, we have to deal with as men together and with the advice of our women as well. But as men, we need to have that. So a perfect example is Dr. Lonzer and I had that conversation today. And, you know, we're always, you know, he and I are related, but we just don't know it. We're trying to figure out where. But I think that conversation needs, you know, I would not bond with Dr. Thomas, Brother Bush, and Dr. Lonzer if I didn't have those conversations constantly, you know. So I think that those are the most important things that a fraternity can do, is change the culture of what it means to be a man in America.
And, and Irene, if you look at our organization, I want to allude to our aims, which are manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. As our brother Metellus alluded to, the manly deeds, yes, being active in the community, and these organizations offer the vehicle to do so, but do so in a manner that pulls in different resources to be effective in the community. And in terms of scholarship, you see my young brother, that brother Bush, he's doing very well in school. You know, one of the things these organizations promote is scholarship. You know, you have to maintain a certain grade point average. You have to maintain your status in school. But not only that, you have to also maintain what you do beyond the college life. I think many of the Black Greek organizations are the only organizations that do things beyond college life. And still be active as part of a fraternity. And then when we talk about love for all mankind, you know, that's what King stood up about. Not only just, you know, what are some of the issues, and one of the brothers mentioned about, you know, working with poor whites, but what are the issues that's really, you know, dampering around not only Black America, but also white America, Latinos or Latinas, you know, Asian Americans. And so part of what King was instrumental about is that galvanizing others and those who had concern around addressing the needs and issues for all mankind. Okay?
Indeed.
So with that said, I wanted to highlight our aims: manly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind, which we sing in our hymn after every meeting and every time we get together. And so that is one of the things that every man of Alpha Phi Alpha has in his heart.
Let's jump into, so I see that we're getting some questions in the Q&A, and I love it. And for our audience, anybody who is tuned in to our conversation, please do feel free to, you know, just say hello, put a shout out in there, put your question in there. We may not get to them all because I do have a few pre-submitted questions, but we will follow up, right, gentlemen? We'll make sure that we get answers to folks. Okay, so I'm gonna go to Camille's question. Camille is an alumna of CNU, and Camille asks, how do you all think Martin Luther King Jr. Day is best commemorated? Community service options offered on campus, day off from classes, just a couple of suggestions. How do you think we can best commemorate Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Day?
So I'll jump in on this one. And I think something that the Alphas do in Virginia, which I would love to be done in every state capital, is a day on the Hill. And I know it's something that's done. Usually there's a legislative day that we take, but I think it should be done on Martin Luther King Day, where people that are disenfranchised go directly to their state capitals and address policies that they want to see implemented, right? Because if it wasn't for Dr. King, if it wasn't for the culture of the society, if it wasn't for him putting pressure on the United States president, we wouldn't have the Voting Rights Act, right? So we have to remember that, yes, it's great to do service, and I really am an advocate for chapters to do service, but you know, if it's at CNU, I believe the students on campus should meet with the administration and talk about what policies they want to see implemented on Martin Luther King Day and make sure that they do the follow-up. Those kinds of things I think are significant. Not to do them, like I said, we all just have our legislative day on the Hills in terms of Black and Latino, you know, but I think that on that day, that should be the day that we go directly to our local politicians and say, these are the premier topics. We need to talk about healthcare. We have a pandemic going on. Today, we found out that there were millions of Americans that lost their coverage between the months of March and December, right? And they didn't even know what to do. They didn't qualify for Medicaid. They didn't qualify. They didn't even know how to apply for the Affordable Care Act because the window opened. So today, the president had to reopen the Affordable Care Act window. These kinds of things are policies that we should be addressing at our local, state, our local and state legislatures.
I love it. Thank you. Anybody else want to jump on that one? How to celebrate?
I will say that, and I appreciate Brother Metellus' perspective, but I'm one who leans towards service on Martin Luther King's Day because, quite honestly, we have to be engaged. And he mentioned, for example, that we do have other legislative days, and I know that many times we're advocating for many of the things that he's talking about whenever we do that. But I also think about the enormity of poverty and the enormity of need in our community. And that need expands not just to have eliminate food deserts in communities where they don't have healthy food, we don't have grocery stores that are appropriate, but also in the sense of being able to provide what I would call even substance for the community, even on how your government works. There are many things that we can do, for example, between the time that we vote and when the next voting cycle is, to increase people's knowledge around civic education, us providing an opportunity to go in and mentor young men and to partner with sororities like Alpha Kappa Alpha or Delta Sigma Theta or Zeta Phi Beta or Sigma Gamma Rho. Well, I have to be politically correct. I have to be politically correct. But when we partner so that we can ensure that we're reaching all people in the community, young ladies, young men, we're giving them an example that they can follow. And but to do the things that Brother Metellus is talking about and many other things, we have great need. But as we shift and as we strategically move, I think that at the very core of what we do, and this is something that I advocate as the general president of Alpha Phi Alpha, is for service. And that service even on an international level, because we need to reach the folks who are in different parts of the world. We're in the United Kingdom, we're in South Africa, we're in Liberia, we're in Bermuda, Bahamas, we're in Canada. We are in places that you probably wouldn't imagine, but in Germany as well. So when I talk about that, I want to make sure that we remember that we are reaching beyond even the United States and making sure that we understand that those needs are global needs. And I think Brother Metellus spoke to it earlier, that poverty impacts the world, war impacts the world. So thank you.
You just did it too. All right. So the next question was, how are you and how is your organization following or spreading Dr. King's message? And so that kind of leads us right into that. Are there any specific things you or the rest of the gentlemen on the panel would like to, sort of share about how you're personally or how your organization is following and spreading Dr. King's messages?
Well, I'll that real quick.
Please go ahead, Dr. Thomas. I'm gonna let you do that.
We have two national programs that each chapter in our organization is required to do over a fraternal year, and two of those programs, well, among two of those programs, a voteless people is a hopeless people, and go to high school, go to college. Let me start with a voteless people is a hopeless people because it ties into what Dr. Lonzer just spoke about in terms of getting, the individuals out there to vote. One, registering folks to vote. Two, understanding some of the policies that we're voting on, some of the amendments that we're voting on, but also being critical about some of the candidates that we are getting ready to vote on. And so we have an opportunity with that national program to kind of foster what King was talking about, making your politicians accountable, addressing some of the needs that impact, disenfranchised people, looking at ways to make life better for others, okay? And so a Voteless People is a Hopeless People is a campaign and a program that we have really gotten behind over the past, mainly 8 years, okay? And so, and beyond that, but mainly in the past 8 years, especially nominating our first African-American president, President Barack Obama, and also, aiding with the, I'm not saying that our organization is responsible for putting them in there, but, many of the individuals in our organization support some of the candidates who are currently in office. And then I want to also think about our Go to High School, Go to College program, which is King really emphasized the importance of education and how an education can change a person's life. And so through that program, we can infuse, especially in middle school and high school students, an understanding of the importance of extending their knowledge by attending college, and also increasing their opportunity to move up in life and provide a life better for those who follow.
Mhm.
And so those two programs really resonate with what King's message was before he passed away, and how we are currently utilizing it in our current situation.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. And also I like bringing in the College Brothers perspective to the Alumni Brothers
Okay.
initial points, but and also understanding that each chapter of our organization may have a different specific program to, like, a Voteless People is a Hopeless People. Let's say for the Upsilon Beta chapter, we do an event called Stroll to the Polls every year, where we try to
Phenomenal.
so we try to include the majority of campus and the majority of those spaces where we need to promote advocacy, and promote voter registration and all of those things pertaining to how we can actually make sustainable change. And I think overall, Dr. King, his messages pertain a lot to our aims, mainly deeds, scholarship, and love for all mankind. And Brother Thomas, you touched on a lot of the scholarship part. But I think also understanding the love for all mankind part is very, it kind of sums up everything about Dr. King, everything that he advocated for, and understanding that we as people need to treat every single other human being as we would like to be treated as a human being. So just overall, us alphas understand that Dr. King represented our aims very well in his message.
Dr. Springer, I just want to say that if I had been just as cool and articulate as Brother Bush when I was in college, Brother Lonzo, I would have shot so much higher than I have now.
Just take it,
Indeed.
Michael. Just take it.
Indeed, and he should take
So
it. And he's
So
he's
practical.
doing a great job expressing the dichotomy between alumni and college, and representing that even though their experiences in the microcosm of a campus life, he's showing the connection, and that those things are paralleled, that we see in, I'll call it, the real world that expands beyond the university campus. But that's where we begin to develop that nucleus and make it get our understanding and our bearings, so that when we graduate, when we go out and we serve, then we're able to now engage and embrace. That's why at the heart of who we are, even though, and we've had some phenomenal brothers, Dr. King, Thurgood Marshall, Charles Hamilton Houston, but at the very core of who we are, we're a college fraternity. We always will. That's where our lifeblood springs from, because they understand the new things that are coming, and they help to share with those things with us so that we can embrace them and be better engaging the community. And that includes keeping Dr. King's dream alive and his vision.
And I will steal 30 seconds and just say, Willis, if you haven't seen the videos from Stroll to the Polls for this past semester, Michael, you need to make it your business to get that to him, because it was phenomenal the way they pivoted and moved that fundraising event. And the cool thing about it is, again, we are a predominantly white institution, and there is no success, I don't think anyway, there's no success for an organization that chooses to ignore the environment in which it functions. So what his chapter has done for the last several years has been to involve other Greek letter organizations, other clubs and sports organizations in the effort to promote voter registration. And so they all join in encouraging folks to stroll to the polls. And it's a really exciting and wonderful initiative. I'm very proud of them. So I had to take that moment there, Michael. All right. King positioned himself, as we wind down, as a drum major for justice. What are your thoughts on that imagery? And what is your drum major issue? Dr. Lonzer, we'll start with you.
Dr. King, and when you were introducing me, I'm a historically Black college alumnus, and I was drum major not only in high school but in college. And the drum major is the showman of the band, yes, but he also she also will represent, if you will, a means of coordinating the things that happen on the field. So when I think about Dr. King as a drum major, he was a facilitator to move social issues along and to help interpret for some and to help transform for others what we needed to embrace as a community and really as a nation and the world. And why that's one of the reasons why he received the Nobel Prize, the Peace Prize, for his efforts in coordinating the civil rights initiatives in this country. And for me, the drum major issue for me is that we have a right to health and health care. And I've spent 20 plus years in biomedicine and professionally. I was a medical academic before, prior to that. And I say to you that that's one of our initiatives in Alpha is to have a Surgeon General. This is about to launch in our fraternity, where we will talk about the health of our own members, but it will translate out into those whom we interface with in the community. Our motto, we've talked about our aims, our motto is, first of all, servants of all, we shall transcend all. We have to be alive and engaged and healthy to transcend.
Nice.
So we're going to do that, and we're going to lead the way and help to raise this awareness. You know, I've received my COVID-19 first inoculation. I've got images of it. I'm going to share it with the fraternity very soon, and to encourage, not to tell you what to do, but to help to encourage you through leadership and demonstration. But everyone has a right to good health and to like our Declaration of Independence says, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And I'll leave it there.
Thank you. Gentlemen, you want to jump in with what is your drum major issue?
And my drum, it's not necessarily an issue, it's more of a request. Well, it can be both an issue and a request. You know, as an African American in the United States, I'm aware of all the issues that we're facing. You know, I've been educated. One thing I will say, I was educated in Columbia, South Carolina. I went to a predominantly Black high school, C.A. Johnson High School, and we had some of the most phenomenal teachers who were those teachers who did the demonstrations in Greensboro, who did the marching. And so I will say we received 2 educations when I came through high school. And then, you know, I'm also a product of a historically Black college university. But, you know, I'm aware of the issues that, you know, Black America is facing. Brother Bush is aware, Brother Alonzo is aware, and Brother Metellus. And the issue I have, and it's also can be prefaced as a question, as a request, is that we need white America to become drum majors for us, okay? We need white America to be the drum majors for social injustice, okay? We need white America to address some of those discrepancies in some of these policies that are really hindering, you know, disenfranchised individuals. We need white America to fight against police brutality, okay, as it's pretty clear in the media. But we also need white America to really stand up for Blacks and be the voice for Black and you know, colored individuals in the United States, also across the world. And so by helping out, you know, that way, you know, I know King was a major drum major, but we do need the support of white America to lead this effort, especially now, because I'm saying we're tired, okay? Literally, we're tired. We've been addressing these issues for years, and it seems like we're going in circles. And I think until we get white America to get on board and be a drum major as well and address some of the issues.
Yeah, that's right. And let me ask you, I want to stay with you for just a minute if the panel will indulge, because we did have a question come in from a student, Amir. And the question was, how do you think, or what do you think is the best way to approach making change in a setting where you almost always have to sugarcoat how you feel? Sort of to piggyback on what you were just saying, Dr. Thomas, you talked a little bit earlier about, I think the term was code switching.
Yeah.
That will make us tired, right? That's exhausting. Can you talk a little bit about that? How to make change where you have to
Yes, I
code
think
switch?
switching can be exhausting. One of the things I would say to Amir is, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. And so, being calculated in terms of what you want to get across and how you want to, bring an issue to the forefront, you have to really think about if then. So that's the logic they teach in geometry, if and then. So if you make this decision or if you address this, then what are some of the fallouts? What are some of the possibilities? So the one thing, we have to understand about Dr. King, he was very critical in terms of how he addressed things. And so he always looked at the totality of it. And so, Amir, what I stress to you is, if there is something that you want to address, okay, look at all the possible outcomes that could take place and then address it, okay? If the outcomes outweigh what you're trying to get across, then I will refrain from doing it and then maybe seek, counsel in terms of, what are some of the things I need to be addressing. But, don't ever be afraid to, address an issue, okay? Take it on, be articulate, be intelligent about it, do your research on it, but also be very calculated with it, because, you want to put yourself in the position that you're getting the desired outcome of what it is you're seeking.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I just had to get that in there. I want to bring one more student question to Brother Lucian and Brother Michael, if that's okay. And then we can come back around. I see you, Brother Lucian. I see you. But this one is just perfect for the two of you. Brandon is a student, and it looks like he's a freshman. And so that really, warms my heart that we have a freshman who's engaging and who has this question. Brandon asks, is it so far-fetched to think that the way forward may require different methods than what were used in the past? Now you see what I'm like. Come on in.
And I agree, and I think it does require that, right? Because, Brother Bush and I talked about it earlier, but I always want to make the point that the methodologies change, right? We don't want to repeat the same things that we've always done, because that's not going to address the issues now, right? So a perfect example I give is when we talked earlier about making statements in uncomfortable spaces, right? So for a very long time, Black men have not really advocated for Black women, right? And so when we, okay, well, I'm speaking. And Brother Bush and Brother Thomas will tell you, a lot of times I have these uncomfortable conversations with my brothers in Zoom meetings, right? On social media and different things like that. So when you talk about the opportunities to change the way we look at things, we have to first look at the way we present and the way we share information and the way we think about things. So we need to, it requires us, if we're going to make some real substantive change, it requires us to change the way we do it, and also understand that some of the things that we think is brand new has been done before, and we need to go back. So one thing I always tell, before you execute, bounce it off one other person, because before you execute, so in Alpha, I have an assistant vice president who's a college brother who sits on the board. We have 5 college brothers that sit on the board with us, that they make up 34% of the board of directors of Alpha Phi Alpha. 5 college brothers, and they help organize a multi-million-dollar organization. So when we come together, right, and Travis Nelson is my assistant vice president of the East, right? I always bounce things off Travis. I say, Travis, what do you think about this? What do you think about that? And sometimes he'll bounce things off of me. Right? And that's the way we make dynamic change in the fraternity, right? Dr. Lonzo will tell you, I'm always an agitator, because the reason I'm an agitator is because I believe that you have to get in the conversation. You have to bounce things off of people. And then sometimes I'm just completely wrong, but I really want to engage in that conversation. So in order for us to make dynamic change, it has to start with us not being afraid to bring up uncomfortable conversations and addressing it in a way that holds everybody accountable, but at the same time, it's not done in the little space in our head that we've bounced it off other people. And I'll defer to Brother Bush.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Brother Metellus, I agree. And I want to also or help everyone understand that the perspective of when we talk together, we want to move forward together. I think that we've seen recently in the media and what's been happening at the Capitol and things like that, that two Americas have different understandings of what forward is.
Sure.
And so when we say move forward, I think that it's our job. And like you said, like it starts with those uncomfortable conversations. Uncomfortable conversations will hope, if we have the goal and intention of finding a common ground, it'll be easier to help find a better solution on how to move forward.
I hear you saying a word that I love to hear and I love to use a lot, and it's intention, right? What is your intention? What are you going into this with? And sometimes we need to encourage people to check their intentions, right? Because their methods are reflecting an intention that is not necessarily the common good. Thank you.
But I want to underscore something that it's been great dialogue, but there's a trial and error reality that comes with social problems, with other types of problems, and even in science and medicine, there's a social component, a social problem that comes if you look, the pandemic. We don't have all of the answers to everything that's coming right now.
Mhm.
So there's a bit of trial and error with it. I had mentioned in our earlier discussion about Hidden Figures, and then that great movie when they were trying to find the go, no go solution.
Mhm.
And they were trying all of the new mathematics. And I know Dr. Thomas is smiling inside, but they use Euler's method, which is old mathematics, to solve a new problem. So when we approach it, one of the balances that I hope can find, and this is one of the things that makes fraternity, and particularly fraternities and sororities that engage throughout your life, not just when you were a collegian, but when you grow up and you go out into the real world and we intermix together, is that there's always going to be benefit when we can bring new solutions and old solutions together and realize the utility that sometimes the old solution might be the right way for a new problem, and for an old problem, the new solution may be the better way.
Mhm. I love
That's
it.
the balance that we are trying to achieve as we work together as college and alumni now. And I always have this conversation with Brother Metellus, and I know we're getting close to the wrap time.
Mhm.
We are the fact that we're the only Divine Nine organization. I can't speak for the IFC or the Panhellenic Council, but of the Divine Nine, where 34% of our board, voting board members, are collegians. That says that we have their interest there. But what we have to do, though, is make sure that we socialize the reality of what we decide to do and how we work. So
Mhm.
coming back full circle, we have to have some tenacity and be brave to face some tough problems. And that's where we go.
I was going to invite you to give closing remarks, and you just, that was beautiful, the tenacity and the bravery that are required for our young men like Michael and our seasoned folk like us.
Indeed.
To continue to persevere and to attempt to demonstrate the values and ideals that Dr. King stood for in our society today. Why don't we take our last minute? We might end up going over by 1 or 2, but I would like to give each of you the opportunity to make a closing comment very briefly, because it is at that time, but I'm so grateful that you were here with us tonight. You've left me with a challenge that I intend to continue raising, and that is, what are you going to do next? What are you going to do now? And so I will yield to you guys if you want to make a closing comment right quick.
By protocol, I should be the last to speak. So we'll let Brother Bush go first.
Yes.
Yes. Well, first off, I just want to say thank you, Dr. Springer, and all brothers, Brother President Lonzer, Brother Metellus, Brother Thomas, and Mary Grace and Sarah for setting up this panel and allowing for this space to happen. I think that this was a very productive conversation. I know I learned a lot from every single person who spoke, and I just want to say thank you. I do want to leave, I guess, a closing quote from Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. One of my favorite ones is darkness cannot drive out darkness, only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate, only love can do that. And I hope that that resonates with people to move forward in a better direction.
Thank you.
Thank you. And in closing, thank you, Dr. Springer, for the invite. I really enjoyed this dialogue tonight with my brethren. Brother Lonzer, our General President, Brother Metellus, our Eastern Region Vice President, also Brother Scott on the call, who is our District Director for Virginia, as well as many of our fraternity brothers who are in the chat, as well as the CNU community and many of the individuals who have joined outside of the CNU community.
Yeah.
Thank you for being part of this discussion. This is a very important discussion. I think there needs to be a part 2 to it. I'll just put that plug out there. But I'm gonna close by three things that I really pull from Dr. King. And as we move forward, we have to be prepared, we have to be critical, and we have to be observant. And those are the three things to me that personify Dr. King and his message throughout his life and beyond his life. And thank you.
Thank you.
Certainly, I want to thank you, Dr. Springer. It's always good when you can connect with somebody, as the Bible says. When two people and there's a kindred spirit. Always feeling that, and I want to thank you for the invitation. I want to thank everybody on the panel, but most of all, I want to thank the CNU community. You all have the opportunity to leave a legacy that no one has left before you, and no one will leave after you. And so here's the perfect opportunity to change the things that you want to change and see the things that you want to see. Always advocate for those that can't advocate for themselves. And sometimes you're going to have to drag people along with you. And that's okay, because sometimes it takes that much. And do it in love. And that's the most important thing that you can do. Everything I try to do in love. And even I'll tell you a little secret, Dr. Springer. Dr. Lonzer, before he makes a speech, he isn't biased towards any sorority, but I will say his wife is an Alpha Kappa Alpha woman. So, I'm not saying that he is biased, but like me, he decided to go first fam. So, he may have slight leanings in a certain direction. So,
And a daughter at Spelman right now.
Yes, I'm not saying anything. I'm just pointing it out there, because the most important thing that you can always have in life is friendship and love. And always try to do those two things. And so I want to tell everybody at this panel that I love you, I appreciate you, and I look forward to moving this world forward with you.
Well, I will say that it's been well spoken through all three of my brothers who are on the panel tonight. I'm immensely proud of Brother Bush and his representation, and he continues to emulate the standard of college men that we look for, and that you are our future, and we will be leaning on you as older or elder brothers to stand up at some point in time, and I'm glad to know that you're there. To Brothers Thomas and to Brother Metellus, I would say that it's always an honor to be in the presence of good men, but it is definitely Alpha Phi Alpha is the culminating meeting point of great men. Many are good men, but they are also not alphas, but there are more great men in Alpha Phi Alpha than there are just good men. So these are great men that I'm in the company of. And I'm very proud of them individually for their own professionalism as well. And I'd like to thank the CNU community as well. I mean, Christopher Newport, being a native Virginian, I know the university. I know that it is a part of the aggregate of academia in the Tidewater area, being a part of that big spectrum of folks, including Hampton University, Old Dominion University, Norfolk State University. I mean, it's a great thing to see diversity and inclusion now being led by my former high school mate, and I'm just very proud of the great work that you're doing and what you represent. But I will say this, and I'll leave you an encouraging word, and thank you to your intern and your university support staff as well. As Dr. King said, the moral arc of the universe is long, but it does bend towards justice.
Amen.
and that we may not always agree together, but if we can at least dialogue, that means that there can be growth. So I look forward to the opportunity to come and join you again. I thank you for the honor. And the men of Alpha Phi Alpha stand continually on the hill. We are sentinels.
I love it.
We are leaders,
I love it.
and we do engage.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Gentlemen, it has been an absolute joy to talk with you tonight. I'm overcome. Thank you to our audience members. There's someone, Timothy, I saw your comments. The comments in the Q&A, gentlemen, you can see those too. So if any of you want to pull up the Q&A and answer someone directly, that is perfectly fine. But if anyone still has questions for the panelists and you didn't get it entered, feel free to send them to me at diversity.inclusion@cnu.edu, and I will pass them along or try to answer them myself. Now we'll close with a list of upcoming Dialogue Series events, and we'll look forward to seeing you in February for our Black History Month panel. But for tonight, we close with our gratitude. Thank you again, gentlemen, from the bottom of my heart. It has been wonderful. Sarah and Mary Grace, over to you.